All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our next installment of the Friends of HSF Alumni Speaker Series. We're very excited to welcome our guest today, Matt Murray, who will be discussing what diversity looks like in STEM, internships in research available to undergraduate STEM majors, and what you can do with a degree in biology. Matt Murray is a graduate of the class of 2018 at Florida State with a degree in biology, and in his time at FSU, he participated in undergraduate research through the Undergraduate Research Opportunity Program. He was a UROP leader, and he was also a member of the Bryan Hall Living Learning Community. Within his 3 years conducting undergraduate research in the Department of Biomedical Sciences in the College of Medicine under Dr. Robert Tomko Jr., Matt completed summer internships at Mount Sinai and Rockefeller University in New York City, where he found a deep passion for health-related research. This also led him to complete an undergraduate honors thesis studying the link between dysregulation of the proteasome, an important cellular machine for protein quality control, and 2 diabetes-associated vectors. The experiences he had at Florida State directly influenced his decision to enter a PhD program at Yale University, where he is currently studying epigenetic and metabolic modifications that occur in pediatric brain cancers. Thank you for being here, Matt. Our student moderator for today is Jason Pawlowski. Jason is a freshman from Fort Myers, Florida, who majors in political science on a pre-law track with a minor in philosophy of law. Jason is involved in the Institute of Politics, mock trial, and the World Affairs program. Thank you both for being here, and I'm now going to hand it over to Jason.
Thank you, Amy, and welcome, Matt. Before we get started, participants, please feel free to ask any questions in our chat to our hosts, and we'll make sure that we get to them. I'd like to start by just asking a question to you, Matt, briefly, if you could share a little bit about your journey through FSU and your current research at Yale.
Yeah, absolutely. So first, I just want to thank you guys for the opportunity to be able to visit, virtually my alma mater, to be able to kind of talk about my experiences since I've left, and now to start with when I was there. So I started at FSU the summer of 2014, and it was by far the best decision I ever made, because for me, I'm first generation college student. This was not anything my family had ever done, and there was a lot of discouragement that this might just be a waste of money, but still decided to invest in myself, and it's been quite a journey since. So a lot of the key points, I think, of my FSU journey were already made, but some of them was starting off, I actually wanted to be in the nursing major, but I did not get in. And so I ended up exploratory, where I decided to apply for the Bryan Hall LLC, and was able to get in there. And, I think that was a great starting point for me to realize, especially with the lessons they teach there, that, not having your mind made up with what you want to do and really just taking each step as they come is so, so important for your academic journey. And I did just that. And it kind of just was a rolling effect. In my sophomore year, decided to study sciences, didn't know which sciences yet, but I found a great research opportunity through Europe with Dr. Tomko in the College of Medicine. From there, he was an incredible mentor, really trying to encourage me always to go past my limits, and look outside of FSU for other research opportunities, which is how I got involved with the research institutions at Mount Sinai and Rockefeller University, both in New York, through their summer internship programs that I can comment on later. From there, they kind of just kept pushing me, and I kept just going, pushing the goal post a little bit more on what I really wanted and what I would consider a success for my undergrad. And that led me finally to applying for graduate schools for PhD programs in mostly disease-focused programs throughout the country. And I ended up at Yale. I've been here now for 3 years. It's been a journey of, being here, getting to really enjoy all the science, and really see the fruits of my labor to fruition now that, it's been so much time past at FSU, and I can really reflect on my experiences from it. So yeah, I just want to thank you guys again for letting me be able to talk today.
Yeah, thank you for being here. Being a first generation college student myself, that gives me a lot to look forward to. And it sounds like you had a great time at FSU. But we have some pre-submitted questions as well. So Do you have any tips to excel in a STEM undergrad major, or any things that you wish you had known before you started? And what's a piece of advice you believe is the most important thing you should know during your time in college?
So I'll start with just the first part of any tips for STEM education. When I went to Mount Sinai and Rockefeller, and I was around other students across the country and also across the world who, I mean, were brilliant geniuses. I still think nothing less of them than that. And what I think is easy to do, especially in STEM fields, is start comparing yourself to others. And you really get trapped in this box that you just want to like do better than this one person, but really that's so short-sighted. When you're trying to go for what you want, you really should be challenging yourself the most and really trying to push yourself past your own barriers and what you think you can do, compared to just, oh, I want to get a few points higher than this other person and stuff like that. I think when I had that mind change to realize that whatever competition I felt at FSU is can pale in comparison to what's out there, it really made me start internalizing my own competition to just do better than what I just did. For the second part of the question, of things that I knew or things I wish I knew in college, I was really stubborn when I went to FSU. I didn't take as much support as I wish I did at first, especially from the people that I care or that care about me and I care about them. And I really lost a lot of great opportunities. I'm so sorry, the name is escaping me. It's the program for first generation minority students, it's great for getting scholarships and grants and stuff at FSU. I completely apologize. I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but that was a program that I was perfectly eligible for, and I just missed out on that opportunity because I never knew about it until I think my second or third year. But I was trying to do it all alone, and I realized very quickly that college and most care. Thank you, Dr. Ziegler. I appreciate that. Yes, the care program. I realized very quickly that you can't expect to succeed beyond your wildest dreams unless you understand that you do have to have help from others to be able to do it. And then the last part of the question was advice, or important advice. I think, for me, learning what I did from the Hall LLC about just taking each step as they come, rather than trying to, have a 10-year plan. This is the major I'm going to do. This is the program I'm going to do next. This is the job I'm going to get. It's just it's like you're asking fate to just destroy that. Like that's what you're doing. And I think slowing things down and just living in the present and taking the opportunities as they come is just the best thing you can do, especially at FSU, where it's just such a fun environment, and there's no rush.
Thank you. I think that's some great advice there. How do you find a professor that will let you research in their lab as an undergrad student?
Yeah, so that's definitely a tricky one, especially because I think a lot of biology students at FSU, there's definitely a bias towards more biomedical related research, and there really isn't a large department for it at FSU, which I'm sure has grown since I've been there. But when I started looking back in 2015, there was only a select few professors. I think even for the spot that I interviewed for in Dr. Tomko's lab, there was about 20 other students also trying to interview for it as well. I think the most important thing is, one, making sure that you're flexible, that I think it matters most that you're getting your hands wet with science rather than doing science that you want to do for the rest of your life. You're just not at a stage where having that specificity is really helpful or conducive for a learning environment. I think if you just focus on trying to find, broad areas of science and finding professors that fit in, you'll end up being a lot happier, I think, in the end, because there are not that many spots. And then the other part I want to add is, if you are looking for a specific spot, persistence in educating yourself on the position, just like you would any other interview, is so important. taking the time to really read the literature, their literature specifically, and of the area of study is also very nice. But showing that, you're very committed, you want to learn, and that you just kind of just need the opportunity to will go so much farther than your grades or anything else. Because in research, intelligence is not always going to be, just given by your GPA. It's going to be shown with how much effort you put into it, because research is all just effort.
Thank you for that. Going off that point about undergrad research, could you tell us a little bit about the work and research you did with Dr. Tomko?
Sure. So yeah, I worked in Dr. Tomko's lab from my sophomore year to my senior year. And his work focused on the proteasome, which, as Amy mentioned, is an important enzyme for protein quality control. So when, for central dogma of molecular biology, you have your DNA, it makes RNA, and then the RNA makes protein. But sometimes when you're constructing your protein from the mRNA, it does tend to misfold, and it can incorrectly form. This can be really hazardous, as if it's not properly taken care of. This can lead to a variety of different diseases, including things like type 2 diabetes, cancer, Alzheimer's, and others. So how these proteins are regulated is super crucial for a healthy cell. And most of the time, the cell can handle it very easily. But as Dr. Tomko's group looks into it more, the proteasome itself is an incredibly complex structure. It has a lot of subunits to it, meaning that there's a lot of different parts that actually help to create it. It's not just one gene making the full proteasome, it's hundreds. And so the lab studied, a lot of these different subunits and how they're affected more in just a basic science way. So like, how is it assembled? What's the timing, stuff like that. But also it looked at it in a more disease lens to see, okay, in this disease, how is it maybe not working properly, and how is it giving way to this pathogenesis? So my research first focused on more the basic regulatory aspects of it. So I think the first research question I asked, along with a couple others in the lab at the time, was, if something's wrong with the proteasome, how is the proteasome taking it out? Because the proteasome is the protein quality control mechanism. And we published our results of our suggested hypothesis in the Journal of Biological Chemistry, I think back in 2017. And then the second question that I asked in my research there was, how is the proteasome affected with specific type 2 diabetes related enzymes that could potentially be hurting it? This is what ended up being my honors thesis, or honors in the major thesis. And I wasn't able to really figure out too much, but my work focused on this molecule called an amyloid, which basically can create these really stable structures in the cell. So they just stack one another, and they make these large pillars in the cell that end up disrupting and potentially killing the cell. And this can be amyloids can be really important for things like cirrhosis, or just scarring all over your liver. And they form these plaques that can also be very damaging, and shown on a lot of biopsy cases. So yeah, my research really focused on how the proteasome could potentially be involved in letting this amyloid be able to aggregate and eventually destroy the cell. Sorry, I tried to make sure that was as non-science way to describe it, but it's also been a couple of years since I really thought about this research, so I apologize.
Well, thank you. That was very insightful. It sounds like you had some good research experiences. Can you tell us about what experiences really created your passion for health-related research? Yeah,
so I think it definitely started in the Tomko lab, where I liked the idea of applying the research I was doing to disease-related models. But that really expounded when I went to both Mount Sinai and Rockefeller. At Mount Sinai, I worked in a cancer biology lab, helping to design new cancer therapeutics. And at Rockefeller, I worked in a virology lab that was trying to design therapeutics for MRSA viruses, or multi-drug resistant bacteria. So in both of these cases, I was working in a health-related field for issues that are insurmountable in the medical field still to this day. And that really impressioned upon me a strong urge to be able to, stay in this field because I found the work that I was doing to be really impactful in my own way. And for me, someone who considered going to medical school for a while, I found that I wanted to use my talents more at the bench. And as my boss or my principal investigator / mentor here at Yale likes to say is that, science nowadays should be bench to bedside, where the science that you do can hopefully have a direct translation to the clinic later on. And I've kind of lived by that principle, I think, even before I started here.
That's great. Shifting gears from that, the experiences that you had there as an undergrad, do you have any suggestions on looking for internships as a recent graduate? I've noticed that most internships are really aimed toward graduate students and undergraduate students.
Yes. So for the internships that I did, they were all just for undergraduates. There are post-bac programs. They're not like one specific name or umbrella, but if you look at different institutions in their like College of Medicine or School of Medicine, they usually have a post-bac program, and these are incredibly helpful because for one, you get to do research in a lab, potentially get some papers. You also can potentially take classes at the university that will, if you have a GPA that you're worried about, you can take those classes. It'll help bump it up, or even prolong your stay in your post-bac program and just go straight for the master's. That's always helpful. And depending on what programs you apply, some of them are paid for through training grants by the NIH, which is awesome because then you end up getting paid to be in this program. Those are obviously a little bit more competitive. But as far as, if you're out of your undergrad and you haven't transitioned to a graduate school, either trying to join a post-bac program or just trying to be a research tech in literally universities anywhere in the country or world is your best bet. There's always labs looking for lab techs to, either do a little bit more like mundane lab tours to even like being able to have your own project and the salary and stuff. I mean, it's not going to be a very high salary, but it'll pay the bills. And those are pretty common really at any university. In my lab now, we have two post-bachelor who graduated, and now we're just working here in the lab. So yeah, there's lots of things you can do. It's just it gets a little less structured the farther away you get from your undergrad.
Thank you for explaining that. I think that's some useful information for a lot of us. Now, shifting back to your undergraduate career, did you find your experience in the Hall LLC to be valuable? And if so, how did it impact your engagement with FSU and your plans for the future?
Right. So, I think I already mentioned it before, but I think the biggest impact that the Hall LLC had on me was, not needing to have everything planned out. At least in my time and what I was thinking about when I was reflecting on this question was that I never felt pressured to find a major. It was always about the exploration of it, taking diverse classes that you probably wouldn't take if you were so dead set on, a specific career or trajectory and stuff. And, as a first year, you tend to just be very gung-ho about whatever you applied for as in high school into college. But when I became a chemistry and biology tutor at Stroger, back when obviously that was in person. And, I saw so many first years try doing the intro weed out classes for chemistry or biology. And a lot of them did change their majors after after they had, spent some time in the major before, inevitably switching gears to something else, which is, totally fine. It's better that you recognize something's not making you happy than sticking with it. But what I think was really helpful about the Hall LLC is that it allowed me to venture out in a way that it was productive. I could try out different areas that I thought I might like, and I ended up didn't liking that, and I stuck with science, and I haven't regretted that decision since. I also loved that they did a speaker series. I remember in my first year where they had a lot of notable people of the FSU faculty, such as Dr. Ziegler. I do remember you giving a talk at the Hall LLC back in like 2014, which I think is crazy that it's been so long. I also remember the late Dean Laughlin also gave a really inspiring speech. And, it was those experiences that, even to this day, I still remember because I think a lot of it was about having the resilience to know that it's okay that you don't know and that you have plenty of time to figure it out. And there's so many resources to be able to do it. So yeah, I would, if I, had to do FSU again, even knowing that I want to do science, I would still try to do the Hall LLC.
That's great. It sounds like that was a very good foundation for a lot of college students. I was wondering, what are your career goals and how do they align with the research you're currently doing in terms of epigenetic and metabolic modifications that occur in pediatric brain cancer?
Yes, so this is a great question. As a third-year graduate student, I should have a more definitive answer, but I'm going to go back to the wise words of Brian Hall, where I don't know yet, and that's okay. The research that I do is really interesting and impactful. The research that I do does have a direct clinical output. My PI is a clinician scientist, so he has an MD PhD. He sees patients pretty regularly, and he's a radiation oncologist, so who does focus a lot on pediatric cases. So most of the stories are not happy. I like that idea because the research that I want to do or the impact that I want to have, I want it to, selfishly, I want it to be pretty direct. But as I've gone through this more and more, when you're in STEM for a PhD program, you really have three different areas to choose from. You have academia, you have industry or the private sector, and you have government. And for me right now, I feel as though I've been in academia for a really long time. And I think after this, I need a break, maybe a permanent break. So right now I'm really trying to explore the private sector, but I think more so with government. One thing that I wish I would have spent a little bit more time in at FSU was actually in political science, because I do really have a great appreciation of it and have been lucky enough to take some classes here at Yale covering subjects or like that. And, I'm really kind of, I think, gearing more towards science policy where, yes, I don't have, a direct public health or epidemiologist background, but what I do have is the bench to bedside knowledge. I can, have this understanding of how the research that I do could potentially in a year or two affect a child with a terminal cancer, and use kind of that, the impactfulness of the things that I do to hopefully drive any policy positions that I may have for, just regular people who, shouldn't need to know so much about cancer, but have to because of their disease.
That's great. And best of luck with all of that. I was wondering if you could touch on your perspective of diversity in STEM and what challenges and opportunities exist within the field.
Yes. So that was something I was really excited to talk about because, so as also a minority student, even at FSU, I never really, I think, took the time to understand what that means. But at Yale, I felt it a lot more presently. And it's because of the students that are here making sure that it's an important pillar for our, education and diversity, which is really important because when I first got here, I did notice that there wasn't as many diverse PIs or faculty members. And thankfully that's grown a little bit over time. But once I've really started delving into the talks of diversity and what it means as an academic, I realized that there's so much work to be done. and it's a top and bottom issue. I think at the top level, you need to have professors and other faculty members, really try to look for diverse students and really make sure that their marketing of their programs are not, these highly selective things where like a 0.0001% of people are going to get in, because that's just not true. Even here at Yale, yes, we're at a prestigious institution, but that doesn't mean that there's like 0 people are going to get in. Like, some people have to get in, and I think the diverse student out there should know that that could be them. That was me. I had no idea that I would get in, and then I did, and I went, and I've never regretted it since. But I don't think that I think the top part of it, there's not enough openness to discuss, giving people chances. And then I think at the bottom of it, for the student level, I think being ambitious is not a bad thing at all. I think you should try. When you're applying for grad schools, and even for undergrads, use the same term of your reach schools, or the schools that you like might be able to get into, but you really don't know, but you kind of just like want to try. I think encouraging people to just try is more than anything. And the other part of this, though, is financial related. When I applied for graduate school, I didn't, I tried to get as many fee waivers as possible, but I had to have my roommates help pay rent for like 2 months for me because I was literally broke. When I got the call that I got an interview at Yale, I was at the dollar store on Tennessee Street buying groceries. Like, I don't think people really understand how financially costly this whole process is. And, I more or less have it easy. On the medical side of things, that's absolutely ridiculous. And it's criminal at this point, with how corrupt that, the interview process can be. And that's why, I think what diversity in STEM looks like is you have to just start having these conversations. You have to be educated in the know-how of this and identify the problems and be able to, be open to talking about them and finding solutions for them. Because, at any university, that's going to be an issue, but it doesn't have to be. There's so much that you can still do. And, I'm grateful, at Yale and the department that I'm at, because I think a lot of the events that happened last summer with George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement really did spark a lot of these conversations to be more solution heavy rather than just talking about the problems. So, I think what happens, in the nation reverberates through academia, maybe just a little slowly because that's academia. But, I think if I'm going to, boil it down to what diversity in STEM looks like to me, is that it's getting better, but it's not great.
I think those are some important topics you touched on. So thank you for your perspective on those. Our next question is, how was the application process for an Ivy League institution? Did you receive a scholarship or fellowship that persuaded you to attend Yale?
So shifting gears, I felt like, I applied to here, Harvard, and Princeton. I never finished Harvard's application, so never mind. It was really long. Princeton's was fine, and here's was fine. I didn't really notice the application-wise it was any different than any of the other universities I applied to. I think the only other notable ones that I'll say were Duke and Emory. They're important later for my ultimate decision. But I didn't really think it was that bad. I think a lot of I think you're getting into a niche field, a lot of the applications are more or less the same. So I think that should never have people uncomfortable to go ahead and apply. I think what does become uncomfortable is the financial costs, as I just mentioned previously. But yeah, I didn't think overall it was that bad. When you're applying for PhDs in STEM, it's actually a lot different than a lot of other fields. My pay and everything, or my fellowship package, is actually through training grants from the NIH. So I don't pay for classes. I get a yearly stipend that's definitely livable. I have 2 cats at home that I bought this past year or adopted this past year. So, I live in a 1-bedroom in a downtown area with 2 cats that I've all been able to afford. So, one benefit of doing a PhD in STEM is you do get paid, and you can get paid pretty comfortably. I'll say comfortably because it's not really that much. So, that's again another benefit of applying for a STEM PhD. And then to the last part of the question, which was it that persuaded me to attend Yale? So again, everybody gives you competitive fellowship packages. For me, I was really narrowed down between here, Duke, and Emory. And I loved all 3 very much. It was a very tough decision. But the nice thing about this is that I couldn't make a bad decision. It was literally just what's the best of all 3 great options. And with Duke and Emory, what universities can do to persuade you to go is they offer extra fellowship money, which was really nice for both of those institutions. Of course, Yale is not the one who offered me that, but I still went to Yale more for long-term career. I think the weight of a Yale PhD holds a little bit more than Duke or Emory, which are 2 fantastic institutions. But I would hope to work there one day. And I think it helps to have a degree from here. But again, it's semantics. I think the value of your education is what you make it, not necessarily just the institution that you do it at.
Thanks for sharing that with us, and thank you for your perspective on that. Now, while you were at FSU, did you minor in anything? And do you think we should have a minor to give us more opportunities for any undergrad research?
Yeah, so I actually talked about this with a couple of my other graduate student friends, the idea of doing minors. So for me, as a biology major, how it was when I graduated, I'm sure it might be, is that you automatically get a chemistry minor. I know someone here who has an ancient Egypt minor as a biomedical sciences PhD student. Are they going to use it for their career? Probably not, but it's an interesting conversation piece. And I feel like unfortunately, I feel like that's what the weight of minors are, is it's you taking an interest in a different subject. But I think career-wise, it's not going to make or break you. I think that if your major is built in to have a minor, that's great. If you want to have other minors, that's awesome. But I don't think having a couple different minors in a couple of different areas is necessarily going to make a huge difference, even for niche subjects. Because if you say you have a general knowledge of biology, that's not gonna be as different to say that you have a minor in chemistry. You're just saying that you're proficient in science, that in a way that you can either you have the ability to learn whatever other subjects you might need to when the time comes. I think that's what the true weight of a bachelor's of science is, not necessarily like, oh, you're good at this one field, because that shouldn't be the case when you graduate, especially in STEM fields. You should, if anything, take out of your undergrad is that you, for STEM specifically, that you know how to learn about science.
Now, going off of that point on research and how those minors can help you, can you talk a little bit about your involvement in UROP as a UROP leader, and sort of what that experience was like? And did you enjoy being a leader after being involved in the program as a student?
Right. Okay. So first off, I loved UROP. UROP was one of the best decisions I made in college, and I actually think I remember hearing about it, seeing a flyer in my or in Bryan Hall. So another rep for Bryan Hall there. But yeah, so I was a student in UROP my sophomore year, and then I was a leader for my junior and senior year. and all three were incredible. You know, in my first year as a student, I, you know, had my research internship with Dr. Tomko. I went to Mount Sinai to do my internship there, and then Dr. Tomko kept me on for 2 more years. You know, that was incredibly invaluable. I think that also encouraged me to want to go more, or, you know, focus more in Europe and move up to a leader role. One, because, you know, the class that you take for preparation to become a Europe leader is incredible. It's a great teaching course, and I think a lot of the lessons on how to, you know, be a good educator has still reverberated from that class that, you know, any prospective Europe leaders have to take. As far as the other point, as like the experience of being a Europe leader, it's different and it's awesome because you end up, you know, co-teaching this class of like 15 to 20 students, all with, you know, relatively the same research area, not always, but you kind of get to just, you know, start them off on their journey and, you know, keep up with them years later. You know, seeing my students now, I think it would have been last year and partially this year, get into their own MD or PhD programs or dentistry or what have you is incredibly exciting because, you know, the research that they participated in with as their time as a Europe student end up paying off for them, and now they got to reach their dreams. And, you know, that's any educators, you know, want and wish is that their students do well. And I think as a Europe leader, you get to have a lot more of a hands-on role than you do in any other type of like educate or like leader role at FSU. But that again is my own opinion about it. The last part was, did I enjoy being a leader after I was involved in the program? My answer to that is heck yes. It was something I still very much value as part of my FSU education.
Thank you for sharing that with us. Sounds like it was a great experience there. And another one of the questions we have is basically, what are your thoughts on writing an honors in the major thesis? Was it like a really grueling process? What term did you complete it? Do you think it's worth it?
Yeah, so that was a mess for me personally. So one of the bad things about doing the internships this summer is that I never had a lot of just straight dedicated days to my research in the lab. You know, having a summer in the lab where you have no other responsibilities, just to do work and do your research is so valuable because you know, on a day-to-day basis, you have classes, you are trying to balance, oh, I have homework, oh, I need to go to this job, oh, I need to set up these plates to grow overnight in the lab. And of course, all happen at different parts on campus. So you're just walking or driving everywhere. And your head is just scattered. But when you have days to just sit and just do research, it's so much fun because you can actually like see things to fruition and not kind of just do it with half effort. So saying that first as a preface, I did my honors thesis the spring of my senior year, so right before I graduated. That was also difficult because I spent the first half of that semester interviewing. So again, at this time, everything was in person. So I was flying around the country from like mid-January to mid-March. I was rarely at FSU for that time. I was there maybe like a day or two per week. And if I wasn't there, then I needed to be either resting or getting ready for my next interview. So I was beyond scattered at that point. And luckily, you know, my teachers or my professors were super understanding and, you know, it worked out in the end. But the issue was I got to mid-March and I still had a lot of experiments I wanted to do for my honors thesis because the story at that point wasn't very completed. And I also had no time to also write an honors thesis, which I found out from my other friends who, you know, went through the process with me. They started writing in January. I started writing a week before it was due until I realized, oh, I can't do this. This is a really hard document that you need to spend time on. And my Dr. Tomko, I know he loved me, but I think in those like 2 months of like March to April, I think I was his worst enemy because he had a lot of responsibilities, and then he was basically like holding my hand through this process because I had no idea what I was doing. I was already like mentally exhausted for like, a year, for like worth a year, just doing all of my interviews and everything. And then I'd come back and like really, kick into high gear when I was running on empty. So my advice is talk with your advisor, with plenty of time in advance over like, what sections of the honor thesis you should do, and not try to do it all at once, because they will hate you for a little bit. And have realistic goals when trying to do it. Like, waiting to the last minute is not the answer. I can assure you. And also, for those, unfortunately, it's not becoming as common anymore for you to be able to go from undergraduate straight to a PhD program. They're just getting more competitive, and that's just the nature of it. But if you do have the opportunity to interview, understand that takes a humongous amount of effort to do, especially if things become in person again, because you are flying, you are going to different time zones, you are doing a lot of things that you have to be on top of your game for, and you're gonna underestimate how mentally exhausted you'll be by the end. So yeah, for me, I don't think that you can go into a PhD program without doing an honors thesis, truthfully, because that's the first real time where you show you've done an independent research project and you're capable of doing that for the next 5 to 6 years. But is it painful? A little. But you know what? I have my honors thesis medallion. So whatever, I did it. And I recommend anyone wanting to do a PhD program to do it.
Thank you for your perspective on that. I've never really heard any stories about anyone who's done it. So definitely sounds like a lot of work. Now we have a couple more questions that were submitted today during this webinar. And so the first is, do you know of any research or shadowing or volunteering opportunities, or where's the best place to look for those opportunities?
So I'm trying to remember. So if you look at Rice University, like Rice University in Texas, I believe so what you're looking for when you're looking for undergraduate internship internship programs in STEM is either SURP, like SURP programs, or REUs, or REUs. It's like research something. But yeah, REUs and SURP programs, because those are what I ended up doing. They are very wide ranging. Really, if you just go to different universities that you're interested in, that's really how I did it. I went to different universities, looked up if they had any undergraduate summer internships, and kind of went from there. There are some like collected repositories where they like advertise which programs that they have. I haven't looked at those in years, but I imagine they're probably better than what they were when I started looking at them. But that was how I ended up finding all of mine. I just looked around, found different universities that I was really interested in, and then applied. And the applications are pretty simple. It's like personal statement, letters of rec, CV, which is different from a resume. CVs are longer. But yeah, it's pretty, straightforward. I hope that helps. Whoever asked that.
Thank you. And our last question here that was submitted today is someone said they were curious listening to all your experiences at FSU, if any of those experiences happened due to a fellowship, and did you apply for any fellowships while you were studying at FSU?
Can I ask, I don't know if the person will message, but can they define what they mean by fellowships? Like, do you mean like internal FSU fellowships, or, external ones?
I actually think they were the one that had to jump off, but it might be with, they might be referencing the Office of National Fellowships.
Oh, yes, that would make sense.
Those fellowships.
So I looked to ONF when I was trying to do more external fellowships. So, I think the big one that I did with ONF was the Barry Goldwater Fellowship, where I got honorable mention. That one is something you have to do with your research university to be able to have them recommend you for this, like the different stages of the application process. I know a lot of people did like Fulbrights and stuff, but for, very niche STEM related internship programs, that's where you have to turn to your own professor or, professors in that department, because they are incredibly niche. You can't expect ONF, who have to deal with every subject area, to be able to have a good knowledge base on that. But, I think from what's out there, you can find stuff. But I didn't use ONF as a resource in that aspect. I used them when I was trying for more or for larger fellowships.
Well, thank you, Matt. That was a lot of information. A lot of great questions were submitted. I mean, to be honest, I'm jazzed. I wish I could go back and redo my undergraduate career, because I think I'd do it a little bit different. Your feedback is incredibly helpful, useful, and I think you hopefully have inspired some students today. I just want to let anybody know, if you missed anything or you want to recatch an answer, this session was being recorded, and I will be sharing the recording with you all tomorrow in a follow-up email, and it'll also be in our YouTube channel, which I will put the link in the chat for that too. But I always think it's nice to revisit discussions like this when something might really connect with you, and you can go back and make sure you get the full picture. So I just want to thank you again, Matt, for spending your time with us today. It was awesome. And thank you, Jason, for moderating. You did a great job. And I appreciate everybody that attended. And stay tuned on our social media. We have 2 more speaker series this semester, and the next one is going to be at the end of March 25th, and it will be alumna Hannah Morgan, who will be discussing how to navigate the pre-medical route and her journey to medical school. So that should be very interesting as well. But thank you all for attending. Thanks again, Matt, and look forward to virtually seeing you all in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys, especially Amy and Jason, for today. I appreciate everything.
Thank you. Bye.